time to talk Buffalo Bills football on the Our Lads Football Network for the OFN today. And for the very first time, Mike Schopp is joining us, who covers the Buffalo sports business, because that's what it is. It is a business, even though there's a lot of sports fans, of course, that would think differently, but they're crazy Bills fans. And Mike has been a part of it for what, 20 years?
More than that now. Yeah, pretty much. And if you include when I was a fan going to games, it's really been most of my life. But professionally at WGR here in Buffalo since 2002 afternoons.
How are the Bills fans? What kind of fans? What kind of listeners are they?
Well, they're probably among the most loyal, rabid fan bases in the league, famously. I think, in the Northeast, sports fans are a lot alike, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Buffalo, maybe as far as Chicago, where it's a very intense thing. It's not something to be taken lightly, how the teams do. And so sports radio really fires when it's like that, more so when a team is down, I would say. And of course, for a few years here, the Bills have been up. So it's been a little bit of a kinder, gentler, I guess, sounding station in the last 3 or 4 years since Josh Allen took off.
And do you think that's going to continue if they don't reach the Super Bowl soon? Like, what do you think especially for the head coach? I mean, head coaches sometimes, they could pick up a team and put them in contention, but if they can't get them over the hump, it's like, all right, well, next guy's got to come in and try to get them over the hump. So how long do you think McDermott has, and how long do you think the fan base is willing to give him?
That's a really interesting thing about sports and teams that get close, like myself, I'll start by saying this, and I've said this a lot on the air, because in the last couple of years after the playoff losses, it comes up like, is he the coach for life because they're 12-4 every year or whatever it is like that? And no, he shouldn't be the coach for life. I don't see myself ever being, though, somebody that would want to see a coaching change if every year we're like this. Like last year they were 13-3. It's the best point differential in the conference. Really 3 losses that all were kind of fluky, that they were close enough to being undefeated, the quality of that team last year. Then the playoff loss to Cincinnati after Hamlin. I don't know. Like if they have the same season, like you said, each year there are more and more people who sort of call for a change, that they'll say things like, well, this team has this flaw, whether they think it's McDermott or something else. We've seen it over the years in sports. We saw it with Tony Dungy. We saw it with Andy Reid in Philadelphia, who then went to his next team and won. I feel like a team as good as this one, you just have to keep going. There's so much luck in it. And obviously there are other great teams in the AFC also, at least 2 others.
Yeah.
Last couple of years. So, but you're right, though. It is interesting how it evolves, because even this offseason, I think, Greg, especially with Aaron Rodgers moving to the AFC East, people are sort of talking like they're kind of bracing for the Bills to slip. The betting markets kind of say different, but sure. I feel like there is that sort of mood about them.
Yeah, as a Jet fan myself, I find it humorous when some people talk about, like, well, Jets Super Bowl bust, and this. Are you kidding me? I mean, they should be the 3rd team in the division, and the Dolphins should be 2nd, and the Bills should be clearly the 1st until any of those teams can even sniff and get close enough. Not that the Bills have been like on a Patriot run, of course, but they have proven over the last few years they're clearly the number 1 team in the division. But this is what I guess people want to talk about, and everybody wants to figure out, how, like you said, how do you chop the top team off, and what are the deficiencies and things of that nature that we can pick on. So let me ask you, what McDermott, let's keep on that before we move on. And that is there something that the fans don't like about either his coaching style or his in-game management, or what is it that they pick on him the most about?
I think if it's anything, it's conservative in the big spots, like in the playoff losses, the first one in Kansas City, and then this Bengal game. Even in terms of defensive strategy, the Bills were just not quite the same in those games. And in the first of those losses, there were a couple of field goals on 4th and short that made you wonder, you're playing Mahomes for the AFC championship.
Yes.
Put the pedal down.
Yeah.
And then Cincinnati, they're calling timeouts on defense. They come out and there's just confusion and really a very different looking team than we'd seen for most of the season.
Hmm.
I feel like that argument is, to your question, it's the thing I hear criticism of him about the most, but I really don't think it holds up too well. There's also the playoff loss, the famous one in between against the Chiefs, the 13 seconds,
Yeah.
where they called defensive timeouts before both of those plays and then backed up. So, like, what happened there? Just it's kind of still baffling. So, I mean, they've won so much. I think when McDermott started, I think his nature is conservative and not ground and pound,
Sure.
but
He's a
kicking those
defensive
field
guy.
goals, defensive guy,
Yeah.
field position stuff. But he really has not been that coach, in fairness. Like,
Okay.
I thought that's who we were getting in the beginning before Allen emerged. That's how he coached. But since, he's been quite forward, with the pass to run ratio and just fourth down decision making. He scores very well. So, I think the answer to your question is conservative in the playoffs, but I'm not sure it's really a good take.
Yeah, you just reminded me, of course, of that. Not that Bills fans need to be reminded of the Kansas City game, because that's the type of game that can wear on a franchise until they get over the hump. It's just always thinking back to, because you just feel like, all right, they would have been a much better representative in the Super Bowl based on how things worked out. But still, at least it's not the end, or you would think it's at the end of a tenure. If it was, then you probably would be at a situation where, all right, now we really need to move on, because sort of like with field goal kickers, if they kind of screw you in the postseason, no matter how loyal they've been to you and solid, you just need to change because they just screwed your chance, and you just can't bring that guy back. That's that field goal kickers. We've seen it, but we're not at that point yet, of course, with the Bills, and I understand that. But that's why I wanted to find out more about your perspective, knowing how the fans react to McDermott and the team in general. What else do the fans pick on? Is there something that they're a little bit upset about, concerned about, that they think that the Bills need to do a better job of?
Not really. I mean, if I were to think of anything, which would be different, I have a particular concern about where they're at that really doesn't come up too often. But, Gabe Davis drops the ball sometimes. There are some sort of old school fans who want to see them run the ball more.
Running the ball, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's reasonable to want Allen to run less, and that's something the Bills talk about. Like, put less on his plate is always the phrase, because really he has to carry them for them to win. But that's Mahomes too. Like, that's most teams with great quarterbacks. So there's that. Tremaine Edmonds, middle linebacker, who was on the field just all the time for them these last several years, drafted in the same first round as Allen was, left in free agency, and they have a little bit of a hole there. I think one thing that I'm not saying, I wouldn't want to say it's a concern, but something to watch about them is that they're not really young anywhere.
Okay.
Like, Hyde and Poyer have been great at safety. There they are again, coming off injury-plagued seasons. Even Trey White at this point, who's had a knee injury in his career. He's not old, but
yeah.
Von Miller, Diggs, like, they're not really young anywhere. So
okay.
Kincaid is interesting from the draft.
Yes.
And a lot rides on him, but this is not like the Bengals, who've been riding this ride on rookie deals, with their key players.
And let's go over. Matter of fact, I'm going to pop up the depth chart, the Ourlads depth chart for the Bills as we go over. I'm just going to go over both offense and defense.
While you're doing that, I just want to say to you, every time I search a depth chart, I always write Ourlads in the search bar.
There you go. Awesome.
That's the one I want. Now they just feed you the ones that you click on. I always make sure to click on the Ourlads one. Going back to, I don't know what my association really stems from, but the 90s when I was writing on the Bills, like, it was always Ourlads. So there.
Appreciate that. Yes. Yeah. Dan Shanka has been with them for a very long time. And I met Dan just about the time that I started getting into my crossover from radio to the internet, which was about, 15 years ago. And so Dan's been great to me, and it's been a fun ride. So yeah, Matter of fact, we just put together a very big partnership with Draft Sharks. So, of course, you know Jared,
Yep.
who does a great job with Draft Sharks. And so that's going to be significant. We finally put a nice little deal together there because Dan's old school when it comes to business. Don't touch this, don't touch that. It's going great. What is this new deal going to do to my business? So for us to actually take that next step and to bring in a partner like Draft Sharks is pretty significant. So I think it's going to be great for both Draft Sharks and our lads. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, very good. I do know Matt and Jared pretty well.
Yes, yes.
They're both super sharp analysts.
Absolutely, yes. I have a lot of fun talking even golf with Jared. So it's fun. Okay, let's go over the offense because you mentioned Kincaid. And all right, let me ask you about Cyrus Torrance. Cyrus Torrance. Is he legitimately in a battle to try to win the job on opening day?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think he's probably the favorite. And I take what I know from our WGR beat reporter, Sal Capaccio, who has been consistent on this through camp and preseason. They have Osiris Torrance, a second round pick who some liked in round one, and then Ryan Bates, who can play center. And Sal has sort of been leaning toward Bates' flexibility sort of makes him perhaps more important to the overall, but less likely to start at a different position.
Makes sense.
So I think Torrance is a huge man, maybe the favorite at this point.
And you would want him to be if he's a second round draft pick because you just talked about rookies. That's young kids. This is what the team needs, an infusion of youth, and maybe they'll get it, a little bit of it this year. What about Justin Shorter? And also we can talk about Trent Sherfield because Sherfield, as a veteran free agent, was coming off kind of, wasn't eye-popping numbers, but it was a career year for him last year with Miami.
Yeah, he's impressive. And they also have Deontay Hardy vying for that slot position with Khalil Shakir, with, I suppose Dalton Kincaid, who's going to play in that position quite a lot. Shorter, a later round pick, maybe he's a practice squad guy. Actually, Greg, speaking of Sal Capaccio, he told me yesterday, and I noticed this, I thought as well when I went out to camp, that Andy Isabella has flashed. They brought him in a little over a week ago, and they have the Nyheim Hines injury in the return game. I'm not sure how they fit Isabella into the final roster without sacrificing someone like Shakir, which that would be interesting if they did that, but I don't think it's completely out of the realm. So Shorter is down the line. Sherfield is a guy, like you mentioned, with Miami and also with San Francisco. He's been somebody who has shown well, but has never been anybody sort of draft darling, and has had a tough time getting opportunities.
Yeah, and Isabella, it's all about timing and where you go, and he struggled to fit in Arizona, but that's Arizona, and they're obviously those guys are gone, and who knows? I mean, maybe he's the next Cole Beasley. He's got the fit, doesn't he? Kind of looks like it. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's likely, but
I know we're reaching here. Yeah.
No, I just felt like it's deserving of a mention.
Sure,
because
absolutely.
Sal has said every day he does something impressive.
Okay, and let's also talk then about actually before we move on to the defense, James Cook. Big news this offseason has been, he's taking control and he's going to be the man. So how is that going to work out with Hines out to bring in? So they got a couple of veterans, Harris and Murray, backing him up. So Cook's, I'm assuming, going to get a load of playing time. Do you think do you think he's going to run even more than he did last year?
He probably will. And for me, it's always been like he had 7 touches per game last year, 7.3. The most he ever had at Georgia was 9. I've never liked the idea of this player very much in fantasy either, because I don't think he's fast enough for his size or, just quite good enough, bottom line. But that's really not everything, as you know, when it comes to running backs. He's got a second round draft capital status. The other guys are not being paid much, Harris and Murray, and they might be competing with each other, and Hines is gone. So I think maybe it's fair to expect Cook to double his touches from last year in the 15 range, but that's still not a lot.
No, it's not. No.
So I don't know what he is running, as the lead back on the Bills. I have always liked the idea of Harris more. I thought Harris was a very sneaky, good move just for the style of player he is. He's been high efficiency through PFF. He led the league in touchdowns a couple of years ago.
Yep.
I think there's a real football player in Damian Harris, but he doesn't outrank Cook. There's no question about that to this point. So if my guess right now would be maybe whether it's Harris or Latavius Murray, they play every third series, something like that, that, you kind of see all over the league these days. So that's sort of, I don't know if committee is right, but rotation.
Do you think that they're going to run the ball more?
I hope not.
So you're not you don't want to hear all of that. We need to run the ball more stuff. You're like, let's just
no.
The more Allen has the ball in his hands, the better.
I mean, yes,
yeah.
And their record has borne that out these last 4 or 5 years. But I do think it's almost every coach's instinct to do that. I always have, I guess I'll say, fear that one of these years the Bills are going to sort of go back into a shell a little bit and try to be a more balanced team. That word again. I really don't see any evidence of it, though. It's just more of a feeling that football coaches always kind of want to do that. And like I said before, I think it is sort of McDermott's nature. But they can't deny how successful they've been.
Yep.
Being at the top of the league in pass to run. So, and that's with blowing teams out. I mean, the Bills have had so many easy wins, and they're still that type.
True.
So I think Kincaid too makes me want to feel like they'll be, again at the top of that list or near it.
Yeah, because I mean, last year in my my 1 year league. A yearly league, because we're in a dynasty league, but I have this league I've been in a long time, and I drafted Jacob Allen a little earlier, because obviously we don't do the quarterbacks much in those leagues as early, but I did, just because the fact that he is just so dangerous, as we mentioned before, as a runner. And yeah, I think he's different than Mahomes, or different than a lot of other runners out there, because he is a big guy. And he can take the hits. Now, you don't want to keep doing it, and I get that, but I just don't think you take that away from his game. He's just so dangerous with the ball in his hands. That's just part of his game.
Right. And really, it's in those moments when it's 3rd and 5 and nothing's open.
Yes.
He's going to go. He's going to go. They're not going to be able to coach. They're not going to want even to coach that out of him. There just might be, really, it's around the goal line. Fewer design runs for him, maybe. I'm not sure it amounts
I agree
to
with
very
that.
much.
Yes.
So, he's been good for 7 or so touchdowns a year, maybe even more, his whole career. And that's really the one area where we'll be looking to see if the Bills want to curtail that and use Harris or Murray instead.
By the way, one more on offense. Gabe Davis, there's been talk that he came out, I was injured last year. Everybody was wondering why his production dropped a little bit. Okay, was that the reason? What do you think? Do you think we're going to see a better and healthier Gabe Davis this season?
I think there's probably some truth to it. It was never being described as a high ankle sprain last year. And the team and the player both have had incentive to call it that. But instead, it was kind of an ankle injury, and then it was forgotten about. He might have missed one game. And really, I thought he was the player he kind of is or has been, which is, vertical.
Yep.
He stretched the defense kind of player, but a low catch rate, not great hands, but, great at contested catches, if that's not contradictory. He was 53% catch rate. It's like the lowest in the NFL, but it's deeper routes. Yeah. So I like Davis fine, and I think my prediction is he's on the field. He was on the field almost every play for this team last year. Diggs came off the field a lot, but Davis almost never did. And I think that's probably the plan. They have no replacement for him on this roster. I don't think he's going anywhere. He's had some good moments so far in training camp. He sat out today, by the way, general soreness, they called it. So they gave him a rest day. But in fantasy, I like drafting Davis a lot because he's 3 or 4 rounds cheaper than last year. I think he's probably going to be about as productive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And maybe that is something that we'll see next year, is, because you just mentioned it, is getting a receiver in there that could fill Davis's role. Because if something does happen to Davis and he's out for a significant time, that's a big deal. because as we know, you're able to stretch opposing defenses like that. You just can't all of a sudden they don't have to worry about him. That's a big deal. So,
And his contract is up after this year,
oh,
so
okay,
he'll be an interesting one. The Bills have signed guys like they did Dawson Knox last year, like right now,
okay,
before the contract year happens. And I've kind of been thinking that will happen with Davis, but hasn't yet.
okay. All right, defensively, and I think this is as if I'm going to look at a team that has just as much talent for a four-man front as my team, the Jets, is this one. I mean, they are just loaded, the Bills, with especially on the edge. Bringing in Leonard Floyd to the draft picks early for guys, bringing in Miller. This is a loaded front, but still, they probably need more production from some of those draft picks, right? Because Rousseau he's the only guy that they've drafted in that first round as far as the edge rushers that has really produced the way that they've wanted.
Yeah, and even that is, subjective, kind of
Okay.
like how do we measure that production? Is it sacks or is it pressure? Is it overall consistency? What Von Miller gave them last year before his injury was the timing. Like the game they won in Kansas City, key plays, sacks on third down to stop drives. Like there's those big moments like the great players
Yep.
are known for. And then when he went away, as a team, their pressure rate just kind of plummeted. So he means a lot. He probably won't start the season week one with his knee injury from last year, but we'll see. Rousseau is fine. Oliver is fine. There's maybe some concern for Basham or Epinesa to hold a spot. Puna Ford is an interesting interior acquisition for them. The Bills have made some really keen, I think, moves on the defensive line over the years, just sort of short-term contracts, guys to fill in a rotation. And Daquan Jones was very sorely missed in the playoff game against the Bengals. The Bengals kind of shockingly were able to sort of walk right through the Bills that day in the snow, and Jones was unable to play. So, like you said, there's a lot of people. Leonard Floyd, a lot of different ways to do it. I think McDermott likes having lots of options up front.
And then you talked about the potential big miss with Edmonds gone. Well, let me ask you about Edmonds. I mean, being an early pick, were the Bills satisfied with his production? Bills fans,
I think so,
and the team.
Yeah, I think so. He was kind of a polarizing player with the fan base, but I think he gave you what you would want for a middle linebacker over the years. Very young, very durable. He and Matt Milano got the job done for them
Okay.
at linebacker over the last few years. Milano is an all-pro now.
Yep.
It is a kind of maybe the most interesting position battle of camp here this year is how they replace Edmonds. They've got Terrell Dodson, who's kind of a veteran and maybe just a guy. Then you've got Terrell Bernard, who's also been injured, vying for that spot. And they have a rookie that was a rookie last year, Bernard. And now you have a rookie this year, Dorian Williams out of Tulane, I think.
I'm a big fan of his, by the way.
Oh yeah, he's interesting, and he had a very good first game against Indianapolis, but he's playing Milano's position.
Yeah.
He's been working there, so it doesn't sound like he's a candidate for middle linebacker. I don't think they have the answer there yet.
Okay. Yeah, I just love what Williams did for Tulane last year. Just I mean, they obviously had a huge season, and he was a huge part of that. The secondary, talked a little bit about that. So, yep, Hyde and Poyer come back. I'm hearing good things about Rapp, and of course Hamlin also making it back is nice to see.
Yep, and Rapp is another one of these kind of sneaky good, sharp moves I think that they make on defense. Hamlin had his moments, incredible story, and in the first preseason game, he had a couple of big plays for them. I think he's probably very likely a part of this team. It'd be weird if he weren't. I mean, with what happened last year, I think he's almost definitely a part of it. The other corner across from Trey White is a tough one because Elam has not been good enough.
Okay.
First round pick last year, couldn't really find his way to the starting lineup, at least early last season. And Dane Jackson, a lower round pick from years ago, has kind of just always been more reliable. What do you want from your corners? Like, just don't get me beat. Just
okay.
Yeah,
sure.
And Jackson has been pretty steady, so it's a guess on my part, but maybe I would predict he starts the season. There's also Christian Benford as well, who did start week one over Elam last year, but Elam has not been, he's not there yet.
So White healthy as he can be? I mean, is there any issues with his health right now?
It doesn't sound like it.
Okay.
He's been a very interesting guy to listen to. He really opens up about his thoughts. And when it was the COVID years, he came close to sitting out, he walking away from it, but he didn't. And then he had the torn ACL on Thanksgiving night. I guess that would have been 21,
Okay.
and came back not until Thanksgiving last year to the
Yeah.
day. So they need him. They need Trey White. He's been an elite player. I'm not sure he is anymore, but he's important.
That would be the one of the positions on the team that they definitely need to get younger at. Correct? They need some new, fresh corners and maybe even some safeties.
Yeah, they've tried with Elam and Benford, who are young, and that has to go well. Which I'm not sure how well it's gone yet. And
Yeah.
then Hyde and Poyer are so important again, like on the field every play for like
Yeah.
5 years for this team, and
That's crazy.
both great.
Yeah.
But Hyde missed almost the whole year with a neck injury, which is tough to come back from. And they've both been in the league so long. Poyer was injured all year and played through it. Again, I think all pro again. But yeah, they don't have forever back there. They signed up here right when McDermott did. They go back, is it 6 years ago now, I think, or seven? 2017 was McDermott's first year, and Hyde and Poyer joined him, and have just been such rocks on the field for them,
They
for the
have.
Bills defense.
But it all ends. Everybody ages, unfortunately, and there will be a time that they will need to replace those guys. So maybe they can get one more good year out of them together, healthy. But sooner or later, yeah, they're going to need to replenish that safety room. Mike, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. What's your prediction on the season? What do you think? Do you have a good feeling that they're going to finally bust through and get to the bowl?
I think they'll probably be about as good as they've been, but won't win as many games. The schedule is a lot tougher. The division is tough. So I think they do well to win 11 games. That's about the Vegas line. Last year they won 13 with having one canceled. And then it's just these coin flip matchups in the playoffs, and you want to have as many of those at home as possible.
That's
It might
true.
be tough. It might be tough with 11 wins. You're not going to get the one seed that way. So I think they'll probably have to do what they haven't been able to do yet, which is beat Mahomes in the playoffs, or Burrow, or who knows, like Greg, there's so many candidates, Baltimore and the Jets and the
It's
Dolphins and the
crazy.
Chargers I like a lot. And maybe
Yes.
Jacksonville has an easy division and gets the one seed and they get a bye and suddenly
Yeah.
it's Jacksonville.
Right.
Like Tennessee a couple of years ago, a team that was pretty weak but had the top seed. So I have no predictions on how those playoff games will go. They
Yeah.
should be there, but it's going to be a hard road.
Yeah, sooner or later, this NFC, they better start signing and moving coaches over there because it's crazy. I've never seen it like this before that I can recall.
Yeah.
This is just incredibly tough. And but maybe that toughens up the Bills. Like again, who cares about how many wins, right? It just matters that you're battle tested and ready to win playoff games.
And that
And
you're
so,
in.
yeah, and I can imagine
That's right.
Bills fans are really chomping at the bit to not just get back to it, but actually get that first Super Bowl would be huge.
No doubt.
So,
Great.
Mike,
I've enjoyed talking to you. Good luck in our draft, by the way.
yes, we still have a little ways to go, but we'll get there. And then I'm going to enjoy the season as well. So it should be a lot of fun, and of course, more than one season, which I like with Dynasty football.
Yes, right.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Mike.
having me on.
Appreciate it.